break into a sweat with even the thought of having company? I'm here to help. After trying just a few of my hosting tips, you'll be more than ready to say, come on over.
And for something completely different in planting, we are now going to plant a beautiful popcorn drift rose in a pot. And we're doing that because I want this pot to go on the deck where it will be happy and bright and just give this wonderful pop of yellow and white flowers, right? Bloom. And that's why it's called a popcorn, not because it pops, but because of the color of the popcorn. So what we've got is a tag that just says popcorn drift rose. So I looked it up on fastgrowingtrees.com and got the information I needed about this rose. Although roses are pretty simple to grow for people, don't you think?
They are. Some varieties are more prone to diseases and bugs than others, but the drift rose is known to be more disease resistant.
Which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I actually planted some in my yard last year, and they are already in full bloom this spring, blooming profusely, and they are probably 18 to 2 feet tall and wide at this point in time. So they will continue to grow, but they require very little deadheading, which is
a beautiful thing.
Right.
Unless you really like to deadhead. I like to deadhead, but there are sometimes times in your life where you're just like, I just, it's really hot and you just don't want to go out and deadhead.
Wow, 750 degrees in Gila Bend right now.
Boom, here you go. And I don't know if you can see it, but there are all kinds of buds on here that are going to give me a profusion of blooms not that far away. The hotter the weather, the happier the rose, right?
And that is true, which is a good point. Roses thrive in the hot sun.
Yes.
So they are not a shade-loving plant at all.
You can grow them in partial shade, but they prefer hot sun, maybe not necessarily super humid, but although the zone for this, folks, is 5 to 11. So if you're in a tropical climate, you can grow this. If you're in a Midwestern, Northeastern climate, you can grow this.
Yeah, I have a dear friend who moved to Florida last year who's a big gardener, and she's done her research on plants that grow in northern Florida, and the drift rose is one of those.
It's kind of a beginner rose, I think, because you can plant this and it's really hard to kill it. It's disease resistant. You don't have to do much work. Basically just sun and water, really. And then we add a little something to it.
Flower tone along the way. We're going to use a different kickstart fertilizer called Biotone. We talked about it earlier to get it planted
and get it started.
But yes, as it matures and everything, a flower tone or a plant tone would be a good fertilizer.
Yeah, I've had great luck with the flower tone. I think anything that's a flowering plant can benefit greatly from flower tone, and just follow directions right on the container or the bag. Sometimes it's liquid, sometimes it's slow release pellets. Whatever you can find is good. So what we've done here is we've put in the soil and roughed it up, and we're going to make sure that we have a spot that's wide enough and deep enough for the soil that comes in here. And because we're putting it in a pot, we're not adding any native soil at this time. It's just potting soil. Make sure you don't use garden soil, that you use potting soil, because it's going in a pot. When Jimmy and I were first married, I asked him to go get me some potting soil. He's like, we have dirt. I'm like, okay, but see, it's going in a pot. And so why do we need potting soil, Fran?
Well, because it's going in a pot.
Thanks, Captain Obvious.
Not the ground.
And it's
not the
fluffier.
ground.
It's fluffier. It lets, it won't get as compact as it will in the ground. You want it to be able to drain really well.
Yes, and most of the potting soils, but garden soils do too. They have some fertilume in here.
So you can see
that
it's
kind
white.
of, yes, it is white. And you can, it helps to keep the soil, what am I trying to say, Chris?
Fluffy.
well, fluffy is a good word, but again, it helps protect it from being watered not enough and too much.
Yes. Yes. And
so moisture control, the bag will say.
Yes, the moisture control soil I've used before in other videos. I really like that. I think it's fantastic. Okay, so here we go. This is in good soil, and you can see there's a little bit of a woodiness to it. Now this particular rose likes clay. So when I do decide to plant it into the landscape, this will be great. So we're going to get it down in there right at the center because a shrub rose spreads low. So I want to make sure I give it lots of room to spread, and then we're just going to build the soil up around it. I'll probably come in and add a little bit more to top it off before I water it. And you know what we forgot to do?
Put it in the biotone.
So
but you can always,
watch this.
But you can also put it on top.
You can,
because the watering process, rain, etc., will push the nutrients down into the soil.
And you notice I just threw it in there. It's not, you don't have to be super precise. And look, we've got the biotone now at the top here. We're just going to get it to, you don't want to get the soil too high. You kind of want to make sure your soil is at the point where it already was in the pot. So I don't know if you can see this, but down here at the base, we're not putting soil in any higher than right here where it was already planted in the nursery pot. And then you just kind of move it around it, and I'll come in and I'll top up the corners when I water it. And then this will go on the deck, and it will give me a beautiful show here shortly.
It will.
Yay.
It will. It's important to note that you don't want to pile your soil or your mulch around the stem of a plant. And that can be a small plant, it can be a tree, but it's important not to pile your planting medium up touching the stalk of the plant.
Because only the root really needs the soil and the mulch. The mulch is great, and I could even mulch in this pot. It helps to keep the moisture down where it's needed, and you can let it go longer watering if you have mulch. It really does a great thing.
It helps hold in the moisture.
Yeah. Our final shrub, almost a tree, is the camellia. This is it's a Yuletide camellia. So when I saw the picture of it, I thought the blooms were hot pink. Fran goes, so it's Yuletide, that's Christmas, the blooms are going to be red. Now I am not a red bloomer person per se. Fran is.
I am.
But I think this is going to be absolutely gorgeous where we have it. And I'll tell you why, or we'll tell you why. This particular camellia is definitely for the higher zones. What did we decide it was? Zone, it is 7 to 9. Yes. So if you are in a cooler zone, you cannot leave this out for the winter. Or if you do, you're running a really big chance of it dying. And we had a cold snap here in the Mid-South around Christmas, and it did take out quite a few trees and shrubs that were right on the edge. And camellias are on the edge for us because we are at 7 for sure. We're not an 8. We are a 7. So we're right on the lower end of the zone. So the lower number is how cold it can get, and the higher number is ideal for how hot it gets.
Is that a rhetorical point, or would you like to do the math?
I'd like to do the math.
So you notice it says 7 to 9. It doesn't have a 10 or 11, which is super tropical. Might be too warm for it, but I don't know. I mean, it's on a camellia by camellia basis, right?
I would say so.
So this particular camellia, what I love about it is even though it's in a quart nursery pot, it can get 8 to 10 feet tall.
Where are you from again?
So you have to have a space that will hold 8 to 10 feet tall. And did it say how wide? I think it's more like 8 wide or 8 tall, 10 feet wide. You can prune it to your liking, right?
Camellias are very forgiving to pruning. Yes.
So pruning is cutting, shaping. I'm going to probably let this go wild because you can see that Fran's by this post here. This is the outer part of our deck. And so it is actually 8 to 10 feet up. And so if this grew up to the top of the deck, that would be gorgeous, wouldn't it? Just to,
It would be.
and then
It would
the
be.
balloons
And it will.
coming out. And it will.
And it will.
It's not a particularly fast grower. It's not a slow grower. It's kind of in the middle, right?
I would say that.
Yes.
Yes.
And now here's the beauty of the camellia, is that just when you think, I can't take it anymore, it's too gray, it's too cold, guess what happens? It blooms. In fact, this one blooms, what do we decide? From September to December or January. Thus the Yuletide title. So it'll start, or it could start blooming what's kind of early fall for us, September.
I would say, see, I'm surprised it says September, but anyway, September, October.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It maybe is
Yeah.
when it's forming the blooms.
Mhm.
And then it should have a profusion of blooms the older it gets, all the way maybe into January, but certainly December, thus Yuletide. But that's not
right.
true for all camellias.
No, it's not. You need to be very aware of, just for your own information, what time of year a camellia will bloom. They're fall blooming, they're winter blooming, and they're spring blooming. And so just be very much aware of that. Pay attention to the bloom season, the size, to make sure it fits your space. This particular camellia has a little bit smaller leaf than some. I love it. I have not this particular plant, but I have one that has the smaller leaves. So it's a little bit more airy than some.
I shall stay until the wind changes.
The other thing about this is that it's evergreen, and I love how the new leaves come out kind of a lime-ish green, a brighter
lighter
green,
color.
and then they deepen to this what looks like a Christmas tree green. And so that is fun to see in your landscape when everything else is gone, except your
Yes.
azaleas and your hollies and your evergreens. There's something that's still green out there that's got buds and it's going to bloom.
It is.
It's a beautiful thing. All right, so it's also drought tolerant, and there's no pruning unless you want to. So we are actually to the side of this plant, and I am planting it up dead center against this post. So we're putting it in clay. It grows fine in clay, but we are going to amend the soil with some biotone starter.
Biotone.
And you can see that I've already, well, I didn't, Jimmy dug the hole, and the pot fits right down in there. I might raise it a bit with some native soil. Oh, there's a worm in here too, so lucky us. Worms are great for aerating your soil for you. I'm going to just put enough soil in there that I can get it to kind of sit up. Am I there, Fran?
Mhm. Ground level.
A little bit more?
The base of the plant needs to be pretty much ground level, not lower at all.
And in fact, it's okay if it's just slightly higher. So I'm going to set it down in this hole. It's a little low, isn't it? Let me get up a little more clay. We don't want, this is on a slope, so we don't want the water to be draining and pooling necessarily. Is that good?
I think it is.
Okay. And then I'm just going to fill in with native soil. You want to hold it? Okay. Just going to fill in around it. And then we're going to pack it in. Not packing is probably not the right term. I'm going to gently tuck it in into the soil.
Mhm. Again, so that you get the air pockets out.
And when you water it, and I put a slow hose on it to really deeply water it, you can almost immediately see if there's air pockets you don't want around your new plantings. I broke up some of this clay soil so that it will be a little easier to tuck in. Clay is great for retaining moisture, but oh, it's a bear. It's a bear to dig in, but it does have its upsides. Now I'm also going to put in just a little bit around the soil it came in, because that's what the armadillos want. They love this rich potting soil.
I'm the holiday armadillo.
So I'm just going to use up all the soil that we broke up earlier, and I want to get it around here to help with the air pockets. You want to talk about the air pockets?
Yes, and if you recall earlier, we just did a gentle pat down of the dirt to get the air pockets out. And that is so that it does not hold the water. Because we talked about you can damage a plant with too much water, just like you can damage a plant with not enough water. So getting those air pockets out gives the plant itself is going to absorb the water as opposed to it just pooling there.
And rotting the roots sometimes. You can see that
Yeah.
sometimes if you've had too much rain, you can pull on a plant and it goes,
Right.
and then you know, oh, we've got a little problem there with too much
water in the
water.
soil.
So then you can amend your soil if your plant is savable. You can put some loose gravel in there. I mean, there are things you can do to amend your soil if it's just retaining too much water.
Yeah.
But you really, if you keep having that problem, you want a plant that wants a lot of water, like a willow.
And that is true, but you need to assess what's causing it.
Yes.
And whether you need to move the plant to a better location for its needs.
And you know, one of the first things I learned from Fran is she said to me, you've got to stop being afraid of your plants. They're not afraid of you.
I said I'm not afraid anymore.
I was like, okay. So we move stuff all the time. We really harshly cut back something if it's not doing well where it is, if it looks like it needs a harsh cut. If this doesn't do well here, we will just move it somewhere else. I have stopped being afraid of that thanks to you.
I'm not afraid of you.
So we hope that you learned so much from us today, not only about different things that you can plant in your landscape, but also how great it is to order shrubs, trees, plants from somewhere like fastgoingtrees.com, because when they arrive already growing for you as opposed to a bare root, you can see what's coming, and maybe you'll even have little blooms all ready to go.
Come on over. Now go make someone feel special today.